Long before money had numbers printed on paper, before markets moved at the speed of light, humans were already searching for something they could trust, something that could carry value across time, across borders, across generations. That search did not begin with gold by accident. It began with necessity. Gold did not feed people. It could not be eaten, burned for warmth, or turned easily into tools. And yet, across civilizations that never met each other, gold emerged again and again as a symbol of wealth. Ancient Egyptians buried it with their pharaohs. Roman emperors stamped their authority onto it. Empires rose and fell, but gold remained, unchanged, untarnished, indifferent to human drama. Why? Because gold possessed a rare combination of traits that human societies intuitively recognized as valuable. It was scarce, but not too scarce. Durable, yet divisible. Beautiful, but not easily replicated. Most importantly, it could not be created at will. No king, no army, no empire could simply decide to make more gold. Nature itself set the rules. Over time, gold became more than a metal. It became a social agreement, a shared belief that this object could represent stored human effort, frozen in time. When people accepted gold in exchange for their labor, they were not trusting the seller. They were trusting the metal. Trust was embedded in its physical reality. For centuries, gold functioned as the backbone of money. Even when paper currencies emerged, they were not trusted on their own. They were promises. IOUs backed by gold locked away in vaults. The paper had value only because gold stood behind it, silent and heavy. But history did not stop there. As economies grew more complex, as global trade expanded, gold began to feel slow, heavy, inflexible. Transporting large amounts across oceans was expensive and dangerous. So societies gradually moved away from direct gold settlement and toward abstractions. First certificates, then fiat currencies. Eventually, pure trust in institutions replaced trust in metal. At least that was the idea. The problem with fiat money is not that it is paper or digital. The problem is that it is elastic. It can be stretched, expanded, multiplied. Its scarcity is not enforced by nature, but by policy. And policies change. In the 20th century, the final link between money and gold was severed. From that moment on, money was no longer constrained by physical reality. It became a tool of governance, a lever for economic control. Central banks gained the ability to create currency at will, guided by models, theories, and political pressures. For a while, it worked, or at least it seemed to. But cracks began to appear. Inflation quietly eroded purchasing power. Financial crises exposed fragility beneath the surface. Bailouts taught a painful lesson. Some institutions were protected, while individuals bore the cost. Trust, once again, became the central issue. And then, in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, a quiet idea appeared. Not from a government, not from a corporation, not from a university or a central bank. It emerged from the internet, published under a pseudonym, almost anonymous in tone. Bitcoin. At first glance, Bitcoin looked nothing like gold. It had no physical form. You could not hold it, melt it, or bury it. It existed only as information, secured by cryptography and distributed across computers around the world. So why did anyone take it seriously? Because beneath the code was a familiar idea. A radical one, but familiar nonetheless. Bitcoin proposed a form of money that, like gold, could not be created arbitrarily. A system where scarcity was not a promise, but a rule enforced by mathematics. A network that did not ask for trust in institutions, but relied on transparent verification. No central authority, no single point of control. In essence, Bitcoin asked a profound question. What if we could recreate the monetary properties of gold, but remove its physical limitations? What if value could move at the speed of the internet, yet remain scarce? What if ownership did not depend on vaults, borders, or permission? What if trust could be shifted away from human discretion and toward open, immutable rules? This is where the phrase digital gold begins to make sense. Bitcoin is not called digital gold because it shines, or because it is old, or because it has already proven itself across millennia. It is called digital gold because it attempts to solve the same fundamental problem gold once solved: how to store value in a way that does not depend on power, politics, or promises. Gold was the answer for a physical world. Bitcoin is an experiment for a digital one. And just as gold was not immediately accepted everywhere, Bitcoin's journey is filled with skepticism, misunderstanding, and resistance. But history suggests something important. When societies face uncertainty, when trust in existing systems weakens, humans instinctively search for assets that feel solid, assets that resist manipulation, assets that exist beyond the reach of any single authority. Thousands of years ago, that asset was gold. Today, in a world built on code, networks, and digital flows, the question is no longer whether gold still matters. It is whether something new is attempting to inherit its role. And that question sets the stage for everything that follows. If gold had one defining feature that elevated it above all other materials in the history of money, it was not its beauty nor its usefulness. It was scarcity. Not artificial scarcity, not scarcity enforced by laws or borders, but scarcity rooted in reality itself. Gold exists in limited quantities. It takes enormous effort to extract. The deeper humanity digs, the more energy, time, and capital it requires to bring a single ounce to the surface. This natural resistance to production is what gave gold its monetary gravity. No matter how powerful a ruler became, no matter how urgent the need, gold could not be conjured into existence on command. That constraint shaped behavior. It disciplined economies, it forced trade-offs, and for centuries, it anchored trust. Bitcoin begins its story at exactly this point. In a world where digital assets can be copied infinitely at virtually zero cost, scarcity should be impossible. Files can be duplicated, numbers can be rewritten, databases can be altered. Yet Bitcoin introduced something unprecedented, digital scarcity that cannot be bypassed, not by force, not by money, not by consensus of elites. The total supply of Bitcoin is capped at 21 million. This number is not a guideline. It is not a target. It is embedded in the protocol itself. Every participant in the network can verify it. Every node enforces it. Changing it would require rewriting the rules and convincing the entire global network to abandon the very property that gives Bitcoin meaning. In other words, Bitcoin is scarce, not because someone says so, but because it is structurally difficult to make it otherwise. This is where Bitcoin diverges sharply from fiat money. Fiat currencies are theoretically limited by responsible governance, but practically unlimited by political necessity. When faced with recessions, wars, pandemics, or debt crises, governments do what they must to maintain stability. New money is created, balance sheets expand, currency supply grows faster than productivity. This process is often defended as essential, and sometimes it is, but it carries a cost that is rarely framed honestly: dilution. Each new unit of currency slightly weakens the value of every existing unit. Over time, this erosion becomes invisible, normalized, accepted. Bitcoin refuses to participate in this trade-off. Its issuance schedule is transparent, predictable, and asymptotically finite. New Bitcoin enters the system at a decreasing rate, halving every 4 years. This mirrors gold mining in an abstract sense. Early gold deposits were easy to access. Over time, the remaining gold became harder to find, more expensive to extract. But Bitcoin goes further. Unlike gold, whose total supply is unknown and could theoretically expand with new technologies or extraterrestrial mining, Bitcoin's supply is known with absolute precision. There will never be a surprise discovery. No sudden flood, no technological breakthrough that doubles supply overnight. For the first time in history, humanity created an asset whose future scarcity is not estimated, but guaranteed. Critics often respond with a familiar argument: Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. It is just code, just numbers on a screen. But this criticism misunderstands both value and history. Gold's value is not intrinsic in the sense that it feeds or shelters us. Its industrial uses account for only a fraction of its price. Gold is valuable because humans collectively believe it is a reliable store of value. That belief emerged because of its physical properties, but the value itself is social. Bitcoin follows the same pattern. Its value does not come from what it can do physically, but from what it represents economically. A monetary system where rules cannot be bent, where scarcity is immune to politics, where ownership is verifiable without trust. In this sense, Bitcoin's lack of physical form is not a weakness. It is an evolution. Gold is scarce because nature enforces scarcity. Bitcoin is scarce because mathematics does. Both impose limits beyond human preference. Both resist manipulation. Both demand effort to acquire, whether through mining rigs or physical mines. This is why comparisons between Bitcoin and other digital assets often fall apart. Most cryptocurrencies can be changed, their supply adjusted, Their rules modified by small groups of developers or foundations. They may be innovative, efficient, even useful, but they are not rigid. And rigidity is the price of monetary credibility. Gold did not become money because it was flexible. It became money because it was stubborn. Bitcoin inherits this stubbornness. Its refusal to adapt quickly, to scale recklessly, to compromise on supply frustrates critics. But that resistance is not a flaw. It is the feature that allows Bitcoin to behave like gold in a digital world. Scarcity alone does not guarantee success. But without credible scarcity, long-term value storage becomes impossible. History has demonstrated this repeatedly through failed currencies, hyperinflations, and collapsed monetary regimes. Bitcoin stands as a direct challenge to that history. It says that for the first time, scarcity can exist without physical substance. That trust can be placed not in rulers, institutions, or promises, but in open code and distributed verification. This is why people who understand scarcity do not see Bitcoin as a gamble. They see it as a bet on discipline. A bet that in a world addicted to flexibility, something inflexible may once again become valuable. And just as gold once stood apart from every other metal, Bitcoin stands apart from every other digital asset. Not because it is newer or faster, but because it dares to impose limits in a world that has forgotten how to live with them. That is the foundation upon which the idea of digital gold truly rests. When the world feels stable, money is invisible. People trust banks without thinking about it. Savings accounts feel safe. Numbers on a screen feel permanent. But when instability enters the system, money suddenly becomes very real and very fragile. Throughout history, gold has revealed its true purpose during moments of crisis. Wars, currency collapses, revolutions, hyperinflation. In these periods, gold was not admired for its shine, but for its silence. It did not promise returns. It did not depend on governments. It simply existed, unchanged, while monetary systems around it failed. This is why gold has long been called a safe haven. Not because it grows wealth rapidly, but because it preserves it when everything else is breaking. Bitcoin enters the conversation at a moment when instability is no longer an exception. It is becoming the background condition. Modern financial systems are deeply interconnected, heavily leveraged, and politically sensitive. A decision made in one capital can ripple across the globe in seconds. Sanctions can freeze assets. Banks can close withdrawals. Payment networks can deny access. For most people in stable countries, these are abstract risks. For millions of others, they are lived reality. This is where the idea of value storage begins to shift. Gold stores wealth, but it's difficult to move. It is heavy, visible, and often regulated. Crossing borders with gold invites scrutiny. Confiscation is not theoretical. It has happened many times throughout history. Gold protects purchasing power, but it does not always protect agency. Bitcoin approaches the problem from a different angle. Bitcoin does not merely ask how value can be preserved. It asks who controls it. Ownership in the Bitcoin system is not recorded by names, documents, or institutions. It is defined by access to cryptographic keys. If you hold the keys, you hold the asset. No approval required, no intermediary involved, no authority capable of altering that fact. This is not a philosophical abstraction. It has practical consequences. For someone living under capital controls, Bitcoin offers an exit from a closed system. For someone facing currency devaluation, it offers a way to step outside a failing monetary framework. For someone whose bank account can be frozen due to political instability or administrative decisions, it offers financial continuity. Gold can protect wealth from inflation. Bitcoin can protect wealth from exclusion. This distinction becomes clearer when we examine modern risk. Inflation is not the only threat to savings. Financial repression, surveillance, and restricted access are equally powerful forces. A bank account is only yours as long as the system allows you to use it. History shows that in times of crisis, access is often the first thing to disappear. Bitcoin does not eliminate risk. Its price is volatile. Its future is uncertain, but it introduces a new dimension of security, self-custody, the ability to hold value without relying on permission. This is why Bitcoin adoption often grows fastest, not in wealthy, stable economies, but in places experiencing monetary stress, where currencies lose value quickly, where trust in institutions is fragile, where people learn early that money backed by promises can vanish overnight. In these environments, Bitcoin is not viewed as speculative. It is viewed as practical. Gold once played this role. Families passed it down quietly, hidden, protected, used as a last resort. Bitcoin fulfills a similar function, but without physical constraints. It can be memorized, transported across borders as information, divided infinitely, and reassembled anywhere with an internet connection. This is not an argument that Bitcoin replaces gold. The two coexist because they solve overlapping but distinct problems. Gold remains unmatched as a non-digital, non-networked store of value. Bitcoin introduces resilience against modern threats that gold cannot address easily. What unites them is their indifference to authority. Neither gold nor Bitcoin requires trust in a counterparty. They do not promise yield. They do not need enforcement. They exist independently of systems designed to manage them. This independence is precisely what makes them uncomfortable for centralized structures. Gold once limited the power of governments to inflate. Bitcoin challenges their monopoly over money creation itself. It is not surprising that both have faced resistance, criticism, and attempts at control. But resistance is often the shadow cast by relevance. The deeper question is not whether Bitcoin is volatile, risky, or controversial. All emerging monetary technologies are. The deeper question is why so many people across cultures and political systems are turning to it during moments of uncertainty. The answer lies in sovereignty. Gold allowed wealth to exist outside the reach of empires. Bitcoin allows value to exist outside the reach of systems. In a world where financial infrastructure increasingly doubles as a tool of influence and control, that distinction matters. Safe haven assets are not chosen in times of comfort. They are chosen when comfort disappears. Gold taught humanity how to store value beyond trust in rulers. Bitcoin is teaching a new generation how to store value beyond trust in institutions. And in an age defined by instability, that lesson is not theoretical. It is urgent. Calling Bitcoin digital gold often sounds like a conclusion, as if the debate has already been settled. As if Bitcoin has earned a permanent place beside an asset that has survived thousands of years of human history. But in truth, the phrase is not a verdict. It is a hypothesis, one that is still being tested, block by block, year by year. Gold did not become gold overnight. For most of human existence, gold was simply a metal. Its monetary role emerged slowly, shaped by trade, culture, and repeated cycles of trust and failure. It earned its status not through theory, but through endurance, through surviving wars, collapses, and regime changes while maintaining relevance. Bitcoin is still early in this journey. It is volatile. It is controversial. It is misunderstood. It exists in tension with existing systems rather than comfortably within them. These are not signs of failure. They are signs of adolescence. Every new form of money begins at the edges, where friction is highest and certainty is lowest. What matters is not whether Bitcoin behaves like gold today, but whether it is evolving in the same direction. Gold's strength lies in its inertia. It changes slowly. Bitcoin, paradoxically, shares this trait at its core. While layers and applications may evolve, the base protocol resists change. Its monetary policy remains untouched. Its supply cap stands firm. Its rules are not optimized for convenience, but for credibility. This is often misunderstood. Critics argue that Bitcoin should be faster, more flexible, more adaptable. But money that changes easily becomes political, and money that becomes political eventually becomes unreliable. Gold avoided this fate precisely because it could not be adjusted to fit short-term needs. Bitcoin seems to have learned that lesson early. Still, uncertainty remains. Will Bitcoin maintain security as rewards diminish? Will it withstand regulatory pressure? Will future generations care about scarcity in the same way? These questions do not weaken the comparison to gold. They mirror the same doubts once raised against it. No asset proves itself in theory. It proves itself in time. The term digital gold resonates not because Bitcoin is perfect, but because it speaks to a collective intuition. That something fundamental is missing in modern money. That convenience has replaced discipline. That flexibility has come at the cost of trust. Bitcoin represents an attempt to reverse that trade. It does not promise stability in price. It promises stability in rules. It does not guarantee safety from volatility. It guarantees resistance to manipulation. These are not small distinctions. They define the difference between an investment and a monetary foundation. Gold never promised returns, it promised survival. Bitcoin, at its core, offers the same proposition. This is why the digital gold narrative persists even through bear markets, scandals, and cycles of hype and disappointment. If the idea were shallow, it would have faded. Instead, it deepens. Each crisis reinforces the question Bitcoin raises: what should money be when trust erodes? Perhaps the most important aspect of this comparison is generational. Gold speaks to the memory of the past. Bitcoin speaks to the architecture of the future. One is anchored in physical reality, the other in digital consensus. But both appeal to the same human instinct, the desire for something solid in a world that feels increasingly abstract and fragile. The future does not require a single answer. Gold and Bitcoin do not need to compete for dominance. They coexist as reflections of their environments. One thrives in a world of atoms, the other in a world of information. Both exist outside the permission structures that define conventional finance. If gold is compressed history, shaped by human experience and geological time, then Bitcoin is compressed philosophy, shaped by cryptography, economics, and hard-earned skepticism. Calling Bitcoin digital gold is not an attempt to borrow legitimacy. It is an acknowledgement of lineage, a recognition that certain monetary principles transcend medium, era, and technology: scarcity, neutrality, independence, durability. Gold embodied these principles for thousands of years. Bitcoin is attempting to embody them in code. Whether it succeeds fully remains unknown, but history suggests that when a society invents a new way to express timeless values, that invention deserves attention, not because it is guaranteed to win, but because it exists for a reason. And sometimes, the most important transformations are not declared at the moment they begin. They are recognized only later, when we look back and realize that something quiet, stubborn, and deeply inconvenient changed the way we understand value itself.